make the best of the premium local markets within our spaces here. This training is supposed to be an hour or less, or a little bit more. So of course, again, it's almost impossible that it covers the entire scope of what's needed to be done. However, I believe that if we pay attention to this, it will help give a proper guide to what exactly needed and why it is very important that we pay attention to it. So like I said, I'm Lawal Abdurrahman developer again. And I think I've met a few of us here, and I'm very excited about the enthusiasm that we have all displayed in regards to having to want to learn about all of these things we're about to discuss here. The enthusiasm by itself shows a lot of encouragements and even a push for us to keep doing this and keep doing more. So I believe that with this, I'm hoping that we'll be able to lay the proper foundation for us to move on with this conversation. Please, I would like us to keep being mute, so that, but in case we have any contribution to it, you want to draw me back on something, please raise your hand in the chat box, and then we can actually recognize you, and then probably, hear your views, so to speak. So going proper into the proper conversation now. So in this conversation, we'll be discussing on, be having an overview of how we're going to define efficiency, and then some analytic comparison in yields per square meter in terms of export earnings, land mass usage, and then from then on we'll be discussing proper good agricultural practices. And then we would actually have to just touch on a few very few points in the good agricultural practices, whereon we'll actually have an overview, like I said, of the certification and standards and how it actually operates, right? So that we can actually maximize time and then know that we have made the best of today. But more importantly, we'll be talking about the site management today. So before we start, I would like us to understand a few things that which I would like us to purge our minds a bit, which is that when it comes to trade, two things are very important and are very without these two factors, it's almost impossible for you to have consistent or constant flow of buys. Like when you say comeback buys, when you have customers who always come back and meet you and they will trust that they would always meet you well. Trust is a very strong foundation to trade. So, and if anybody wants to buy from you, the major thing they want to know is that, can I come back and buy this thing? If I come back and buy it, can I come and buy it at the exact at the exact same quality of what I got the last time? As a marketer, if you can guarantee these two things, most likely you'd always have consistent trade. It's a general principle. It's not just about farming generally, right? So it's a general principle that if you can guarantee quantity and quality, people don't just want to come all the way from Yola to Kaduna, want to come and get one thing when they know they actually need 10, right? So they want to know that if I'm coming around, I can actually get the exact capacity I need and I can get it at the right quality of what I need. These are the two major things that most of our agricultural produce in Nigeria find very hard to meet up with. It's either our volumes are not consistent enough, which means that we actually operate in the rainy season and sometimes in dry season, so we cannot always guarantee the actual volume of what we can produce. Sometimes a whole lot more, sometimes a whole lot less. The second one is the quality, which is like that we hardly can actually define that, okay, so today I produced yellow maize, tomorrow, and the next harvest I'm going to produce black maize. Next one, I'm going to produce green maize. And it's never always consistent in regards to the quality. Sometimes we've got a lot of weasels in it. Sometimes it's got a lot of microbes in it. Sometimes it's got a lot of aflatoxins in it. It always varies. Something is always up. Something is always wrong. And this is the essence of good agricultural practices on the overview, which is to see how we can always have a structure where we can always guarantee the quality and then the quality, which gives us a very strong system of having what we call quality control. Now, because it's farming is quite different when it comes to validating quality control, because it's a live thing. Sorry, is there any yeah, sorry for the distraction. So it's a live thing. So for us to have an overview of this, we're going to ask us this question. I would like us to also just pay attention to these few questions that we're going to ask here. which is one. What crops can we grow? So if we ask ourselves in our own space, in our own locality, in our own environment, what crops can we grow very well? What crops can we grow effortlessly? What crops does it require the least amount of input for us to grow it efficiently? What crops can we say like that we are doing a lot of research on it and then we are actually growing in its capacity? Now, when we answer this question, we now begin to ask, of this crop, how many can we produce per square meter? Many of us don't even know what a square meter is. Sometimes apologies here, but I mean, I've been in a couple of questions, a couple of conversations like this, and then people even find it hard to actually understand what a square kilometer is. Square meter is, and it's it's just when you just say a meter by a meter. You know, that's what we call a square meter. So the idea is for us to actually validate or understand like how many of these crops can we grow per square meter. This information is very, very important, especially when it comes to international trade. In the next slide, I'm sure in the next few slides, I'll show you why this is very important, right? So when we ask ourselves, how many crops can we grow per square meter? You know, this helps us understand what we call efficiency, which is one of the things we also have to discuss along the line, right? And then we want to know at what cost can we do this per square meter? What's the cost of us growing this crops per square meter? Which means that sometimes we spend so much to get what we have. Sometimes it looks a lot, but it's actually efficient enough. Is it actually, are we actually making profit from it? Are we actually, getting the best of it? And we also want to know in under what condition. Are we growing them under safe conditions? Are we growing them in very toxic environments? Are we growing them for the right markets, right? Are we growing them under the right specification, under the right quality? We need to ask ourselves this question. Then we have to also ask, with what resources available. Do I have a hose or do I have a drip line? Do I have a tap? Do I have running water? Do I have a well? Do I have a greenhouse? Under what resources available are we doing what we're doing? All right, I need to give this question. So if you're able to get that, then now this is where we begin to now ask to what markets. Are we taking it to the local markets? Are we taking it to the international markets? Are we taking it to a manufacturer? Are we taking it to a local store? Are we taking it to the food business operator? Are we taking it to the West African regions? Now, these are questions that we have to predefine before we even start sometimes at all, because some of these things shift. Because I'll give an example. If you're growing, say, let me use the animals for example. I know this very well. Works very well even in local market with catfish. If you're growing for the Lagos market and you're growing your catfish, you are better off growing at less than 1 kg. That is 500 grams, 600 grams, on the average. That's what the Lagos market really wants. The Lagos market wants it not so big, but very, very, like they want it a lot. Like it has to be a lot, but not so big. However, if you're taking it to places like Port Harcourt, if it's not up to 2 kg, they will not buy because they love it very big. It's the same catfish. However, if you bring 2 kg to Lagos here, it might take a while before you sell it. And if you take me lunch, you call me lunch to Port Harcourt, it might also take a while for you. Not saying you're not going to sell it, but different markets have different conditions and different requirements. The same thing if you want to take it out of the country. If you're taking vegetables out of the country, they have different specifications, different requirements, which has nothing to do with whether it's just safe or not. It's just preference. So we have to learn how to work with those preferences to ensure that we are actually doing it as they want it to be done. Right now, how do we do this? Is why we said this conversation is very important that we do. Then, of course, in what condition? In what condition also has a lot to do with what kind of market, right? So, but in a more specified manner now, So there's what we call grading systems. So what they say when we say grade, what is grade A in Nigeria might be different. What is grade A in America when it comes to color, when it comes to size, when it comes to texture, when it comes to feeling, and all of those things. So we have to know under what condition, and of course, how much do you really want to earn from this? Now, how much you want to earn from this means that sometimes you might be taking your product out of the country and be making less, or you could be taking your product out of the country and making a whole lot more, right? So at the end of the day, it's still the same product, but by the time you do your plus and minuses, by the time you do your aggregation skill and all of those things, you're better off identifying where your market actually has the most value. And that is where we actually see how much can I earn from it. How much do you earn from it? Is it that are you better off processing it? Are you better off selling it in the raw state or whatnot? So these are just overview questions that we always like people to ask, while we are doing whatever it is that we are doing, because it's always safer when you have a clear purpose of why you're doing what you're doing. And this is just to help us give a guide to it. Now, I'm going to use the few next slides now to justify why I said this is very important. Okay, so this is going to be like an analytical comparison of yield per square meter in export earnings in different countries and their land masses and stuff. Sorry, please. I need to be sure that as I'm moving, the slides are moving, so that it's not like I'm just speaking and I'm only one seeing the slides. So please, are your slide? Can you see my slide at the particular page I am right now? Can someone please confirm for me, please?
Yes.
Yeah, it's changing. You're getting it.
Okay, thank you very much. So now we're about to see some of the analytical yields in terms of yield per square meter in different countries and where we are in Nigeria and why all of I said is very important. Okay, so you can see this is the first one I have here is in the Netherlands. Can we see it? This is okay. Yeah. Okay, so we can see it. Okay, so this is the Netherlands. So you can see per square meter, like I said earlier, like when I asked you what is your per square meter yield, this is why it's very important that we do that, because this is the foundation of how you actually define if you are doing well or not. So in Netherlands, they've done so well to the point where per square meter they can actually begin to produce up to 50 to 70 kg per square meter when it comes to tomatoes. Now we have to understand that they have a landmass size of they have a landmass size of 41,543 square kilometers with a population of about 17 million people, right? And this is how efficient they have grown. They are growing their tomatoes. These are efficient. They are growing their peppers. So their peppers, they can grow up to 25 to 40 kg per square kilometers. And their cucumber, of course, you can see the numbers, and then maize, and it goes on and on like that, right? Now, if we see this and we see the crops that are being grown and see how much they make close to 100 billion plus. It's over 100 billion when it comes to total of what they actually export out of the country, in terms of tomato production, in terms of their general agricultural produce. That's in Netherlands, right? You can see in Egypt, they have something not so big, not so much, right? So it goes like that as well. They make close to 3 billion, right? So USA does a whole lot more, they make over 190 million, in total export trade. Okay. So now we can see, now going back to just running straight down in African countries that are like more of African countries. Nigeria is not doing so bad in Africa, right? But of course, in terms of world trade, we can always do better. So on the average, we have something close to like 8 to 15, right? Compared to the best, which does like 50 to 70. Okay, now this is where it gets interesting. Like we have a population of 222 million, 24 million in the estimates. It's not the actual value actually, because they haven't done a census yet. And I have a land mass size of 923,768 square kilometers. Now you can see the difference with the Netherlands. Netherlands has 41,543. Now this is what we call, like, they have very small land, very small population, and they produce very big. Okay, we have very big population, very big land, and we produce very little. And most of our exports are earned from what? Cocoa, cocoa rubber, more of like cash crops, cash crops basically, not majorly from fruits and vegetables, meaning that when it comes to the fruit and vegetable industry, it's still like a virgin for us. We have not tapped anything from it yet because of our efficiency levels and with some of the things that we don't take serious. Now, okay, and this is Israel. Israel is doing almost the same as Netherlands, right? So now, why do we say all of this? To say that what the major target, for why we do what we do is to be more efficient in what we do. That is, so when we want to define efficiency is what? The ability to produce the maximum amount of agricultural output with the least amount of inputs, such as land, labor, and resources. Okay. Now, what does this mean is that, take for example, some of us grow in greenhouses. Some of us, for example, catfish. Some of us grow in in concrete ponds and the likes. The idea is this is like that, and this is where I'm going to actually touch a bit on the urban gardening. which means that you have a big land, 1 hectare, 2 hectares, doesn't guarantee that you make profit from it. That you have a plot doesn't mean you cannot maximize your yield. Okay, it's all about how you actually prepare your structuring, how you actually identify like the questions I asked earlier. Using, for example, if I grow stevia or I grow sweet corn or I grow high earning crops, right? And I do that I do that on a plot, I might be making more money than someone who grew, take for example, local maize on 1 hectare. Why? Because local maize sometimes might command lesser prices because it needs a lot of land mass, right? But for me, I'm just doing a plot. I might be growing a crop that each plant itself might be costing close to 1,500, close to 2,000 naira, close to 3,000 naira. I could be growing any kind of crop, any kind of what's it called, flowers and all of those things, and be earning a whole lot more from that little space that I have. Which means that it's not about the space you have; it's about understanding what surrounds what it is that you're growing, right? And by understanding what surrounds what it is that you're growing, you're able to earn more. Now, I just said that to say this again, that even though the value of your crop is still, for example, growing sweet corn here, it might be earning, take for example, 1,500 per kilogram here in Nigeria. The same crop could be earning you close to $2, $3, $4 if you're exporting it out. It's still the same crop, but different markets. So the idea is like, how do we optimize whatever it is that we're doing in such a manner that we are actually getting the best value from it? And this is what we call efficiency in the broader scope of things. Now, if you understand what efficiency is, efficiency is, so what we want to now ask is like that. So if Netherlands was able to do this, if USA was able to do this, what is it that we are doing or we are not doing that has allowed us not to become that efficient as they have been doing? And this is where good agricultural practice comes in place, right? Now, you might want to ask, how does good agricultural practice, help achieve all of these things? How does it help us become more efficient? Now, yeah, I might not be able to this is where it begins to get a bit more technical a bit, but of course I'll try as much as possible to make it easier for us to understand, because this is the actual, by understanding what this does and how it operates, it helps us understand the overview of why we are here. Now, agriculture is we can never learn the entire thing of agriculture because it's so diversified, so much. Like there are different crops, there are different things that are going on before you learn the soil, the food, the crop. I mean, a whole lot of things together. However, the understanding of the structure of how good agricultural practices operate helps you bring everything together to understand how it actually should flow and how that flow should actually help us understand better and actually improve on what we have done. Now, the Netherlands did not just wake up one morning and just become this efficient in their production structures. They grew to that structure. They started from somewhere and they started developing and making themselves better off, and then making themselves better off and making themselves better off up until the time that they are actually here. And that they are here doesn't mean that they have stopped, because as they are growing on, they are still doing a whole lot more things, to make things better. Which means that for us to actually become better, it means that we must have some sort of plan or structure that helps us identify what is working and what is not working. And then knowing how best to improve on those things. And this is, like I said, this is like an overview of what good agricultural practice is. So when we want to define it, we define it as what is a set of principles and standards, technical recommendations aimed at ensuring sustainable. So when we say sustainable now, it means that sustainable means that we can do it now. It will, we said it will buy it. I think it will, the trade can come back to us. We'll make some more profits. We can put back in it. Make some more profit. Can put back in it to make some more profit, and then it's actually self-sustaining, because the people that are buying it want to buy more. You that you're selling want to sell more, and then that transaction keeps rolling and rolling and rolling like that. And for that reason, now it means that it's actually sustainable. And then it's well, because it also ensures being safe. Because if you're doing it, the ideas of for it to be sustainable means that it must be safe at some point, in all our doings. And then it's actually, and also efficient agricultural production, which is what I just defined. Which I took some time to define. That is efficient agricultural production. Efficiency is the key in all of this conversation, right? Now, these practices, but we understand that we said there is a set of principles. We said there are some things that are like principled. We understand like that. This is how it operates. There are some principles behind these things. Now, those principles is what forms the structure of the good agricultural practices, right? Now, these practices are designed to help farmers produce food in a way that ensures food safety, reduce environmental impacts, promote worker safety and welfare. Gaps address the first aspect of framing, which includes, sorry, before I go into that, you have to understand like that. So one of the essence of it is to also, like I said, promote enhanced productivity and ensure traceability and transparency. Right, these are the objectives of GAP as well. I think which I've also kind of like defined, in the course of explaining all of these things. So when I say what includes, now these are the things that include. So these are the things that I mean, if we are actually having a proper good agricultural practice training, these are the things that I would actually be discussing on. That is how to understand the production and agronomic knowledge. So for us to actually have a very structured good agricultural practice, means that one of the things we have to understand is how to produce and have the good agronomic knowledge. So it means that if you're growing, what this means is this. I'll give an example. If you are growing, say, sweet corn, you have to have the entire knowledge of sweet corn by itself. You have to understand your demographics. You have to understand the soil requirements. You have to understand the water requirements. You have to understand the temperature requirement, the pH, and everything that is required for that sweet corn to grow. You have to have the full grasp, the overall structure of whatever crop it is that you're growing. So that production and agronomic knowledge is very, very important, while you're doing, if you want to actually run through gaps. Now, so this information by itself, it's of course it carries another entire conversation, because we want to actually break this down. But like I said, it's sort of like an overview conversation. Okay, so by having the production and agronomic knowledge helps us, break things down better. I'll give an example. Yeah, if we have when we are doing poultry, for example, we'll say want to know that a poultry bird will consume 1.5 kilograms of feed in a day. It will drink 2.3 liters of water. It will eat this, it will eat that. It requires very little, it requires total amount of sunlight, total amount of temperature. I mean, we have all those. So those details, right? We also need them in our agricultural system. Even though it's actually more pronounced in the animal structure, because we assume that we don't need them in the agriculture, in the crop section. But I'm just saying like that. This is where we are missing out, because by understanding this thing, this is one of the reasons. These are one of the ways you can optimize the yield. I'll give an example. If you're growing tomatoes and you grow tomatoes take for example, in a temperature of 25 degrees Celsius, for example, your yield could be affected, because it might be lower than if you grew it in a condition of maybe like it was a temperature of 13 degrees Celsius, which means that some tomatoes thrive best when the temperature is not so hot, and some thrive when it's actually very, very hot. Some thrive when the pH is actually slightly acidic. Some thrive when the pH is actually basic. So it's never one size fits all. Every crop has its own like unique combination of requirements. So by understanding those requirements is how we can actually begin to like dance around it to actually ensure that we actually produce the best. Okay. Now it comes to after this knowledge, so it's not enough to just have this knowledge. You also have to know what it calls that like site management.
There's seminar now. Around 2 now I go close. I will come go market, go buy the goosey and other things.
So when it says site management, so site management means that this is like the foundation of how to prepare your space. Like I said, efficiency is by understanding how to grow best using the best square meters, sorry. And it's how you prepare your site that helps you achieve some of these goals, which means that your site management lays the foundation for what flexibility.
they got it this evening. We go do them now.
Is it possible to mute all participants?
I'm trying to see.
I
I'm
don't
trying
know.
to. I did that before.
That one roll you go buy now. The 3 basin. How many crap will come out?
I tried to mute up as much before, but I don't know how it got.
Okay. No wahala. Okay.
All right.
Hello. Yeah,
Hello?
Talk
Yes, please.
go to. You are the host, or make me a host. I will mute everyone. Put them on
Okay,
mute.
let me make
Once
it.
you put mute, all everybody will mute. You can do it from your end, okay, please. Eh?
I've done mutual. I did that before, but I don't know how it ended up. Let me just make it the host, sir.
You keep do it because once somebody unmute themselves, they will leave it on. Eh? You have 17 participants, and my own is not a mute. Oh, everybody now is on mute. Everyone now, except you and I. So I'm going to put myself on mute now. Then you can continue, okay?
Okay, sir. So can you still see my slide? Oh, sorry. Please put it in the chat box, please, so I can see that. That's the advantage of.
Only 9 participants.
Okay. So I will need to reshare the slide again. Oh, I changed the posting rights. Right. That's fine. Okay, so so if you can hear me, just put it in the chat box. If you have any comments or contribution, please just put it in the chat box. So I'll be following from there. So as I was saying, so I was explaining all of this, and then the importance of why this is all included. By understanding all of these things is how we are actually able to, have a strong overview of what good agricultural practices are, and then how we can actually make the best. So this is what, so like I said, site management is what is how you prepare the foundation for traceability, how you prepare the foundation for a well-structured layout, how to know that, okay, I'm growing, I can grow if I grow by 2 meters apart, or 3 meters apart, or 4 meters apart, I can make so amount of volume of crops or production. I can have I mean, this is where the foundation of preparation comes to play. This is how you know that if I have this is if I on this land I can produce so amount of volumes of plants, so amount of volumes of or I can use so amount of volume of water and all of those things. So by having this very strong site management structure helps you, lay a very strong foundation for all of these things. And of course, and this also relates to how how your strong management plan, and then your risk assessment, and then your farm mapping and layouts. All of these things work together. By after understanding all of these things, then of course you can now begin to go into the seed and propagation structures, knowing the kind of seed to use. I'm sure many of us who are actually into farming understand like that. Even though yes, there are seeds, there are different kinds of seeds. There are some seeds that would, for example, even as simple as
they come up again.
So when we say risk assessments and all of those things, seed propagation, when you follow like that, for example, there's Ewedu from Abeokuta, there's Ewedu from the north, there's Ewedu from Yola. So even every seed has different qualities and properties. Different people have different preferences. So the foundation of even identifying some preferences starts from how you understand the kind of actual seed or seed propagation material to use for the right kind of market. And this actually plays very important information. And the kind of materials that we're using, the kind of soil or substrate management, then fine margin principles, water management, plant protection products, developing traceability, record keeping. Everything is intertwined in such a manner that without one, you might miss out the other, and then there's actual flow of how all of these things operate. Again, I would apologize and let you understand like that. This is the essence of why good actual practice training is actually very, very elaborate. Sometimes it takes 2 to 3 days because it takes a while to actually understand all of these things. And not just understand it, but to actually correlate it with how it actually helps us become more efficient. Unfortunately, like I said, 1 hour or two might not help us, analyze or understand the entire thing of this. But what I will just do today is like that we'll start off with one, which is the site management. I'll try as much as possible to explain how that works. And it's on that, if we're able to lay a very good foundation on this, we may actually help develop a few things going forward. At least that would help us keep some sort of practicality and takeaways from this conversation. Then afterwards, I might actually just jump into the last thing, which is more like post-harvest losses and things like that. Understanding like that, there's still a whole lot of things that needs to be discussed, probably not now, but as time goes on, probably we'll be doing it one after the other, as time permits, right? But I mean, that's just, like I said, the foundation for all of this. Now, going right into it, so we want to say, like site management. Now you're saying this is an urban garden farming, right? So as I've said, you can see there are different boxes here. You can see this box here. Let's just assume this is 1 square foot. By the way, this is actually 1 by 4 meters. So this box is supposed to be like 1 by 4 meters. Now this person's land is on a 561 square meters, right? So it's like it's on a 561 per square meter land. So it's expected that. So this is one of the ways we actually estimate the yield. Okay. So we are now designed the farm in such a manner that each box here is 1 by 4 meters. Okay, so 1 by 4 meters has its own number, right? So you can say this is 1 meter, this is 4 meters apart. And then in between it is 0.3. That's 0.3 in between it here. So I'm going to say this is actual land size. This is actually how to actually start by defining the land. But rather, this is because it's urban farming, we try to design it a bit to make it look like boxes, fine land, designing it a bit. But of course, it was on the farm, it could have been a bit different where we could just have it as simple beds, not necessarily putting them into this kind of boxes and all of those things. Okay, so this is one of the, like I said, one of the ways we prepare the land, right? Divide the land. So, so ideally, we can say if it were on the proper land structure, we could say that this 1 meter, for example, is box A. You can see this entire row here is row A. You can see this entire here is row B. You can see this entire row is row C. So there's a way we define all of this land, and this is going to lead me to the next slide here. So you can see this next slide here actually shows how we design the plots. Okay, so let me assume this is our row A, row B, row C, row D. So we can now see like that. So we say on the farm, there's a layout on our document, on our on a paper or on our Excel sheets, we call it our reference document. So in as much as we have the site on one side, we will also have a reference document. So a reference document is like something that mimics what's actually on the floor, on the land. So on the floor, this is where we are supposed to be doing all our permutations, all our designing. So if we say this is our plot A, we have 5 beds. So if we have 5 beds, we go by 2 meters apart. It means that we go 2 meters apart in 10 meters, we can actually have what's it called, 20 plants. Well, if you have 20 plants can yield such an amount of things. I mean, so this is how we actually begin to do the estimates. Now, this estimate is supposed to help us identify what the quantity, like I said earlier when I was going to start this presentation, I said there are 2 things that are very important, the quality and then the quantity. Quantity is how we predict the volumes and how we are able to tell our markets that I can guarantee you 2 tons, I can guarantee you 3 tons, I can guarantee you 4 tons, I can guarantee you 5 tons. But what we find in Nigeria is that most of us, we emotionally say, oh, most of these things. They have not done the homework. You just say like that, if you give me such amount of time, I'll give you 5 tons, I'll give you 10 tons, I'll give you 20 tons, without actually putting the homework to find out what you can actually produce with your space. And if you actually did that, you are able to actually, predict and then, work with your market better. Okay, so you can see here, I have a structure here that also defines like how you just, like I said, this is a foundation on how you keep your records anyways. So by the time you have something like this, you're gonna have like your plot A. The left chart is your plot A, P1, P2, P25, which is, it has a plant. So you can now begin to like predict your planting and harvest dates. You can predict your what's it called? The kind of crops you're growing, your seeding dates, your growing period. There's a whole lot of records that should come out of this structure if you're able to do it rightly, right? So, but like I said, this is what we call site management. So your site management have to define. So what I've just defined now is the layout, is the farm management structures and all of those things. And that helps you, push the conversation further and better, right? So now we are going into the seed the sourcing. So it's not just enough for us to actually have the right plants, right site. If you have the right site, you might also want to have the right kind of seed. So when you say the seed now, we want to know the source, because the source helps us, match the market's demand. When I said something earlier, I was like that, there are some information you have to be armed with before you even start at all. So by arming yourself with those kinds of information helps you know the kind of where you're supposed to source for your seeds. There's different between iceberg lettuce and Romanian lettuce. There's a market for iceberg lettuce, there's a difference for Romanian lettuce. So but because you have access to the seeds doesn't mean that you should just plant them anyhow. You have to know what the market wants first and then grow accordingly. And one of the ways to grow accordingly is to start from the right source of seeds. Now, some seeds are so volatile that you have to also know the kind of treatment that the seed require. So there's what we call seed dormancy, which means that every seed sometimes has something that prevents it from growing. But our own intelligence will see how we can actually break those dormancies. Sometimes it's just a way of, so seed treatment sometimes means that how to break the dormancy. Sometimes it means that how to protect it from insect attacks. Sometimes how to prevent it from rotting. So different treatments for different crops and different plants and seeds like that. So which means that the only way we can identify it is if we understand the characteristics of those kinds of seeds. Now, by identifying all of these things, there's something else that's very important, which is what we call uniformity. Now, uniformity is the way we identify how to ensure that all our seeds, are growing at the same rate. This requires some sort of calculation in one way, because ideally, so when we say you have a very uniform cropping system or very uniform seed production system, it means that if we grow 100 crops, it means that at least 80% of them are almost of the same height, of the same weight, of the same structure. So if you see them, they're almost entirely the same. That's what we call uniformity. They will now have maybe like 10% is a bit too big, or 10% is a bit too small. What we are trying to avoid is to have, like, we have 20% of it being too big, another 20% being too small, and then 40% being on the average. That is a very poor uniform structure. So what we're trying to achieve also while we're doing all of these things is to ensure that we have a very strong uniform structure. And this is how we're actually going to determine a germination rate and efficiencies. So of course, when you say a germination rate, it means that when you have 100 plants, you planted 100 seeds, you want to ensure that at least, like I said, 80% of them are growing, or 90% of them are growing, or 100% of them are growing. So it depends on how many of them were successfully grown. This is what we call generation rates and efficiencies. And then, of course, how we keep those records. Why are we keeping these records? Because this is exactly where we start the foundation of what's getting better. Now, if you planted some crops initially, you planted 100 seeds, only 80% of them grew. I didn't record it. By the time you're doing the next planting season or next planting system, there are some things that you must have missed. There are things that must have happened while you planted the first one that didn't allow it to germinate rightly. So if you had kept the records rightly, probably you'd have been able to identify some of these things. What are some of these factors? Sometimes it could just be the climatic factors. Probably it was too hot at that time. Probably humidity was too strong. Probably the temperature was too high. Probably the heat was too low. So that is why we actually say like that. When we say good agricultural practices, more of how we actually keep some of all this information at heart and at mind and at paper, because paper information is very important. And from this level on, and of course, we keep going on and on and on and on like that. So from the seed production level, move to the main production level, from main production level, we move to the harvesting and all of those things. Like I said, I'm only going to touch on these two for now before I move to post-harvest handling. So I mean, just assuming now that we have already done all of these things, that we've done it rightly, and we just say, okay, so what are the post-harvest techniques that we're going to use? So what we say harvesting now, so these are things that are very important when it comes to the trial practices. You rate the importance you attach to planting is as almost as it's even more. You have to pay more attention to how you harvest. So there's what we call the tools that we use to harvest. So one of the things is how we use our crates, the hygiene we take care of when we're harvesting, and what we call pre-cooling treatments. So why are these things important is because when we say post-harvest losses, but these are things that sometimes we mistake. Take for example, if you see it here right now, as well you can see my mouse here. Now you can see what is being transported here, right? You can see by the time this gets to the market, be sure that over 30% of what is being transported here would end up losing its value. When I say losing its value, I'm not saying to waste exactly, but let's just everything gets to the market and gets market right. What it means is this like that. A couple of them would have been compressed in such a manner that they will now say it as what we call ESHA or bad or less substandard, so to speak. But remember that while this produce was leaving the farm, it left the farm at the idealest condition, which means that the only reason why we are going to lose 30% of the value is because we did not transport it with the right kind of structure. And this is where this comes in place. So this is where these concerns are like, I want to be sure that we are harvesting we are harvesting the right kind of facilities, and we are doing it under the most hygiene condition. Hygiene in the sense of like that, you have to understand like when it comes to safety, although when we're talking of agricultural practices, we're going to be talking about from the foundation of everything because safety actually starts from the farm and then runs up to this space. But we don't want to have done so many good things from the back and then get to this point only for us to compromise all the good efforts we have been making to ensure that our foods are hygienically packaged and all of those things. This is where some people actually try to put some sort of tablets, that gives a lot of toxic fumes because they're trying to weed away pests, or they're trying to weed away insects, or they're trying to weed away all of those things. But if you had done the right structure, I put the right structure in place, you might not need to have all of those things done. But because in Nigeria here, we kind of we don't do some things initially, and then when you have the wrong result, we begin to use a fire brigade approach, to cure those things. And that's where we begin to have different problems. Now, bear in mind that when you're talking of export markets, one of the biggest things that we want to check for is we call it the MRL, that is maximum residue levels. You want to be sure that you're not actually having toxicities in your crops, in such a manner that, that you'll be consuming poison, so to speak. So they test all of these things. And that's why I say these are things that you have to take very important. Now we say pre-cooling treatment. Well, I say pre-cooling in the sense of that sometimes when we harvest, there's this effect when you harvest that the crops itself begins to get hot. Now, I'm sure this happens even when you slaughter an animal, it begins to get hot. That heat, when you get them together, that heat is enough to almost, there's what we call decay. It helps. These are things that makes things rot faster. So in the farm, it's always safer. Before we even begin to transport anything, we try as much as possible to put them in a room where we can reduce the temperature to the maximum level before we begin to transport them and take all of those things out, and then have all of those things done. Oh, sorry, can you hear me?
Yes, we can. Yes.
We are hearing you.
Oh, okay. I thought someone said I lost the sound. So okay. So so this is how we do the pre-cooling treatment, right? So and this is I mean, like I said, this is not the entire thing. I just pick 3 things out of the entire things that are needed, right? So when we say
all back now.
Yes, I know there's a mistake.
so when we say post-harvest treatment now, when we say post-harvest treatments, so when we say post-harvest treatments, so these are the kind of things we also want to, like I said, we have to understand what we call pre-cooling. Then there's what we call fatum, that is sorry. There's what we call fatum, which is what that is for food to decay. This is just an extract of food safety management. Okay, so there's what we call fatum, that is for, we say, for food to decay, it has to have what we call fats or food in the sense of like fat or food in the sense of like that. I mean, the body of what is decaying itself is the food. For without the body itself, they can't be decayed. So without the tomato is the body. They can't. So the tomato, when you operate it, is the food itself, right? Then we have what we call acid. So when if it is too acidic, or if it's less acidic or basic, it affects rotting. Then we have,
I know. How did you see?
Okay, I don't know. I just had, I was even wondering, like, when we came back, I was in the kitchen.
so there's what we call time. So there's time that is required for decay to occur. Understand that we say it takes 6 hours without all things being equal. It takes 6 hours for food to begin to decay. There's what we call temperature. So there's an ideal temperature that is, there's a temperature, so the higher the temperature, the higher the rate of decay. Then oxygen, which means that without oxygen is required for food to decay. And moisture, there has to be some sort of moisture content, water content for food to decay. Now, if you want to now preserve food, of course, now the science of it is to learn how to reverse all of these things, whereby if you arrest, take for example, if you arrest the time, this is why you use cold storage, or you reduce the temperature, or you reduce the moisture. This is why we dry things, or you remove the oxygen. This is why we make some things airtight, or you make it too acidic. This is why sometimes people put a lot of like chemicals or like gas in food and all of those things. So by the time you put, I mean, there's a way you are going to dance around all of these things, to increase the shelf life of food produce. So but the most important thing for fruits and vegetables, the 2 things that we try to adjust is what is the time and then the temperature. So if you are able to take, for example, you want to transport to the UK or I mean, so UK is closer. So of course the idea is to save time by making sure that you harvest on time. You are able to harvest on time, package it on time, and then transport it on time, so that you are able to maximize, you are able to do everything, and then it gets its final destination long before it begins to rotten. But sometimes the idea is like that: before you operate with time, you have to see how you can actually refrigerate or pre-cool in such a manner that you reduce the temperature to the barest minimum before you begin to transport it. So by reducing the temperature, you're going to increase the shelf life, and then by reducing the time, you're going to also increase the shelf life. So like I said, this is just how we maneuver all of these things to ensure that we have a stronger structure. And of course, understanding the kind of storage method you can use. So it's not enough to have all of these things. You have to know how to properly store your produce in such a manner that you protect them from external factors that can actually increase its shelf life or reduce its shelf life or increase its a method of being decayed. And of course, and this also works with how to maintain the quality and extend its shelf life, and how to manage the pack house. The pack house is where you actually bring the produce, where you begin to sort them. Probably this sometimes could be a room, could be a shed or something. This is where we actually kind of like manage so this is where we do the pre-cooling, where we package the bait before we begin to transport it. Now we have to understand like that. There's what we call the chain of custody. So when you have done a very good agricultural practice system, it means that you should be giving it to someone who understand what we call good storage practices as well. So storage in the sense of like storage could be a pack house, could be a proper storage facility, could be something that holds for a while before it begins to distribute. So this is what we call good distribution practices. So all of these things are like steps and steps and steps and steps and steps that are sometimes taken before it gets to the final market, which is either going to be the export market or your local manufacturer or your retailer or your manufacturer or whatever it is. But the idea is like that. It doesn't just stop at good agricultural practices, because if you do what is right here, I don't do what is right there, it means that this one can compromise all of the things that have been done here. And if you don't do this rightly, this, for example, now, after doing all of these things, you now put it in a transportation vehicle that doesn't have a very good cooling system, and then it now took 2 days or 3 days before it got to its destination, like what we saw in that picture, which means that no matter what has gone on here in the good GAP and in GSP, this is enough to just compromise it all. So this alone can actually destroy a 6 months good work that has been done here just because we didn't take care of this. So the idea is like that, because we have the knowledge of agricultural practice, doesn't mean that you just sleep and let it lie there. You have to be sure that you have an understanding of how to ensure that the next chain of custody is being handed over to someone who actually understands how to protect the crops. And by so doing, this is how we actually increase our efficiency. Because if you have done the right thing here, it means that you had 100% here, and you took it here, probably maybe by plus or minus, you lost 10% here, and then at this level, maybe you lost another 5%. So that way you have helped at least achieve something of an 85% efficiency to the market. Whereas in Nigeria here, I can bet that most of the things that get to the open market ends up losing over 40% because we don't understand this entire three value chains, so to speak. So I think this just summarizes it. I mean, like I said, it's a bit like understanding good agriculture can be a bit technical. I mean, it's a whole lot of conversations, a whole lot of details, and all of those things. So like I said, I only brought out these 3 things, just to save time. I thought just to let us have like a proper overview, of I'm sure with this, if we like I said, we pay attention to them, there are things that we can actually begin to implement, on our farms and wherever it is that we are operating on. Yeah, so to speak, like I said, it's just a foundational conversation, just to help us to push us to begin to do some foundational structures. So now, so I was going to ask us, so I want to just quickly touch on the essence of certification and standards. Before I do that, I would like to ask us, which of these carrots here do we see as okay, I'll open the chat box now just for a few minutes. Which of these carrots here do we think is one? Which of the carrots here is organic? Which of the carrots here is has been grown with very, very little chemicals or very little insecticides and the likes? Which one of the carrots here, has grown, which of the carrots here has been poorly grown? Which one of the carrots here has grown in the most in the worst condition, that is, they have been affected with a lot of pesticides, herbicides, and the likes? So let me open the chat box a bit so we can actually have to.
The carrots by the right-hand side.
The carrot by the right-hand side, yeah?
The top right-hand side. Top right, right,
okay,
the other
one.
side.
Okay.
No, the other side.
This one?
Yes.
Okay.
That one looks very organic and well-grown.
Okay, this one looks very organic and well-grown. Okay,
no, not that one, the right one, the one by the right, the other side.
This one?
Yes.
This one where my mouse is, okay, interesting. So who else?
It looks very organic and well-grown. Mm-hmm. Well, that one you were pointing before looks like something that was not properly grown. The one below it looks like that was grown in a haphazard manner, while the one below that one that I pointed to first looks like it was grown with insecticides.
Interesting. Oh, okay, fair enough. Any other person wants to make an attempt?
Hello, I want to go. The
All
one
right.
by the left bottom looks more natural to me. And then the one by the left right bottom doesn't look well at all. It looks diseased. And then the one on the top left, it looks natural too, but like it was just left to, I don't know, it was just left to grow, and then they just harvested it when the time came. While the one on the top right, extreme top right, looks well taken care of, well groomed, and deliberately produced.
Okay. Thank you very much for the attempts. One more person, or do you just end it there? Is there another person that wants to try?
Yes.
Okay.
From my own observation, the one by the left, the small ones in size, they look more organic to me. For me, but I think the seed, there is an issue with the seed, but it looks more organic. The one top, the one that has spoon and fork on top in it, that one is like they use a chemical fertilizer for that one up. Then the other right one, the one that has leaf, the top right, is okay, but I think it's miss it was well taken care of, that particular one. Then the one down, I don't understand that one. Maybe I think maybe if it's from, but it doesn't look healthy to me. But the one that is small size is the one that is more organic to me. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you very much for the attempts that have been made. I'm sorry, but you see, this is the beginning of why, this is why we say certifications and standards are very important. Okay. The reality is this like that. It's impossible for us to actually know which is organic, which is safe, which is bad, which is good, and all of that stuff just by looking at these pictures. I'll give an example. You know that especially this one that looks very green and very fresh and all of those things. This is exactly how we are always deceived in Nigeria here. When people bring in like very red, beautiful tomatoes, they're like, oh, it's organic, and we are always moved to buy because it looks very attractive. But you forget that there's a difference between hygienic and safety, and hygienic and and safety. These carrots could have been grown every week, putting different kinds of insecticides to keep every kind of insect that might attack it. And it would increase the maximum residue level to the point where if you test these carrots, you might be actually finding it very close to poisoning. But by the time you harvest it like this, because you put all the chemicals possible, it's come out so green, so lush and fine, right? But there's no way one can actually see it or identify it by visual expressions, because nobody followed the procedures, okay? And this is where certification is very important. The major way to validate or trust that the produce has been grown the right way is by following it through the growing process. And this is why certification is important. I'm saying this to say that the reason why most people, when they say the export markets are asking for certifications, is because they want to be sure that what they are buying is from what they want, has followed what they want. So it's not just about the food safety, it's about so many other things that are tied to it. I'll give an example. If we have Muslims amongst us, we say halal, halal doesn't have a physical appearance. It only means that it must have been grown in an halal manner. And how do you identify it as halal? Is from your emotion, it's from your is from the principles. Like, okay, so I slaughtered it this way, I did not slaughter it this way. I did not use pig manure, I used pig manure. I did not do this, I did not do that. That's what makes it halal or not halal, right? But I cannot look at this carrot and say, oh, this carrot is halal. I cannot look at it and say this carrot is organic. So it's only way we can do this is actually if we follow through the procedures and follow the process of how these crops are being grown. So if as an urban farmer or as a grower, where the market is demanding that we grow carrots for us that is organic, or we grow carrots for us that is good at codified, or that is UBTC, or we go it. I mean, different markets have different values. Like we want it to grow as halal or whatnot. The idea is for someone to be able to follow through that process and see that it actually went through the right process. That's the essence of what certification. So I'm going to go into this points now. Define what standards are. So standards are established guidelines or benchmarks that define characteristics, properties, or performances or performance criteria for products, processes, services, or systems. These guidelines are developed by standard organizations, industry associations, or government bodies to ensure consistency. Please note this word. To ensure consistency, quality, safety, interoperability across different products or services within an industry or across industries. Standards may cover a broad range of aspects, including dimensional materials, performance metrics, testing method, environmental impacts, and more. Compliance with standards help facilitate trade. Remember this, compliance with standards help facilitate trade and helps and then by providing a common framework for assessing and comparing products, thereby enhancing interoperability and market acceptance. So in other words, standards are what people have. Take for example, if you're doing, I'm more familiar with Global Gap. So Global Gap has its own standards. So when it comes to Global Gap standards, so these are documents that actually explain what the market wants internationally. So the documents of Global Gap standard has like, so if you're going, say if you want to take for example, if you want to buy a product, I want to sell it to say Tesco, you want to sell it to Walmart, you want to sell it to different organizations all over the world, right? So the standards that Global Gap operates with is such that if you're able to meet up with them, it's more like you are already penetrating those kinds of markets. So those are what we call standards. So we have organic standards as well. So organic standards are standards that if you do them and you grow them in the organic manner, it means that there are markets that people want to buy as organic. There's what we call halal standards as well. So there are different kinds of standards. There's UTC, there's UBTC, there's, there are different kinds of standards. But the standard is what defines like what the market, so like in the US government has its own standard, the Japanese government has its own standard, the European Union has its own standard. So different organizations, different groups come together to define what we call standards. They come together to say that, okay, in our country, we don't want to grow, we want to have crops that are being grown under this condition. We want crops that are being grown under this safety net. We want crops that are being grown with this kind of nutritional value. So they have different standards like that. Now, as a country or as an exporter, what we should be working on is how to work towards these standards that these people operate with, because they are not just, we don't grow crops for ourselves and think that we are trying to sell to someone else. The person you're trying to sell to knows what they want. It is you that are going to grow to the manner that you grow to what they want. The same thing for us here. I might be in Lagos here and be servicing the market I might be growing in Abakaliki, I might be servicing the market in Lagos. I might be growing my crops in Yola, I might be serving my market in Kaduna. So even I'm sure many of us will understand when it comes to commodity traders. Different markets have different emotions. So the idea is for us to grow towards those emotions. Those emotions are so the documented emotions, long and short of it, like those documented emotions are what we call standards, right? Now, being able to meet up with those standards is the act we expect, right? So there's what we call specifications on the other hand. So specifications are now like specifications are the So standards are like the overview, the general. Well, specifications are now like the nitty-gritties of it all. On the other, so that's on the other hand, a detailed description or requirements that outline specific attributes, features, or parameters of a product or service, unlike standards, which are general applicable across multiple products or services within a particular category. Specifications are more tailored to individual products or projects. Specifications may include precise measurements, tolerance, material finishes, performances, criteria, and other things I mean, so and so and so forth. So if you understand this, what it means is like that now, Captain John has provided us with some off-takers, for example. The off-takers are requiring that we grow, he wants to start exporting ewedu, he wants to start exporting lettuce, he wants to start exporting yam or whatnot. So specifications here would mean that what size of yam or what size of ewedu, what kind of packaging material does it want? What volume does it want in that packaging material? What does it require and what kind of color? Does it want it as very, very green or it has to be light green? Does it have to have, so I'm sure many of us will see this, like we must be 0.00 moisture content. What kind of moisture content must it have? I mean, so all these final details is what we call specifications. So by being able to meet up with those specifications now helps you to actually hit the right market, hit the right target market, because someone who is buying, he's buying because he knows that this is I need this product for so and so thing. And for it to meet up with what I need it for, it must be at this kind of specification. So it's not enough for us to grow to standards. It's actually ideal that we grow towards specifications. But of course, going to specification means that you must have been able to at least meet up with what standards. And that defines the two procedures for standard and certification. So you might want to ask, what are the procedures being certified? You know, so locally, we would say one, you have to identify a verification or certification body. You have to negotiate and sign agreements with them. Then there's what we call internal assessment. I'll be showing us what it looks like. What we call internal assessment. So you see all of these things I mentioned earlier about good agricultural practices, for example, are like, so they have a checklist for all of them to see that, have you done this? Have you done that? Have you done this? Have you done? So there's what we call internal assessment, whereby you yourself as a producer, you're able to hold on to that document and be able to assess yourself. Have I done these things rightly? Have I done my farm map rightly? Have I done my farm layout rightly? Do I have a very good reference document? Have I grown? Do I have a very good packaging material? Do I have, all of those things is what we call the internal assessment. So from that internal assessment, it's going to be a document that is actually going to help you identify what is needed for it to be done, what is missing, where you need to improve better, where you have it's a measurement system, where you're able to actually identify all of those things. And by so doing, from that point, you are able to know what kind of trainings you're supposed to be doing, where you need more capacity building. Sometimes for many people, it's more like, I need to know how to protect my crops from being invaded by insects, by pests and the likes. Now, after doing all of these things, then you now invite an external system to come and do what the inspection for you, but come and do an assessment for you, and this is where we need a lot of assessors and inspectors, because this is a market that is actually it's not in Nigeria, so to speak. We don't have a lot of people in this aspect, of the value chain, So you have inspectors who will now come to your farm, look at your assessment that you have done by yourself, and they begin to say, okay, this is what you have done. Or you say you have done your reference documents. You have done your this. Okay, so madam, you did not do this well. Or sir, you did not do this well. This is how to do it. Like I said, that exchange is how you're able to initially, do better. Then if the assessor or the inspector or the auditor comes and then finds it good that you have done the right thing, then they issue you a verification letter to validate that yes, you have met up with a particular standard. Okay. This is how this works. But if it was for international markets, the same procedures that we have said. The only difference is that it requires an audit this time. So where we would have had an assessment, in the other hand, if this one requires a proper audit. A proper audit is where we actually begin to, that same assessment document is now formed as a checklist, whereby you begin to get scores. Okay, so you did 90%, you did everything on 90%, you're on 80%, you're on 100%, you're on 50%, you're on 30%, and then of course, based on the certifier, every certification body has its own limit. So some say once you score 95% before you can issue the certificate. And that's how you get your certification letter with the organization. So this is what the assessment document looks like. This is from Global Gap, for example. So these are, like I said, these are the checklists. So you can see the site history. You're going to ask you a few questions, and then you're going to find out, okay, have I done this with your ticket? So there's what we call major must and minor must. Yeah, I mean, not going into all of these details, yes, but this is how it looks like. And then, so of course, by so doing, this is how you gain access to, if you're under the local market, gain access to structured markets, restaurant, food business organizations, supermarkets, community traders, industries and manufacturers. And the same thing with international, like gain international markets, take for regional markets, take for example, the West African, what's it called, West Africa, AFCTA trade deals and all of those things. But just that this requires, like when it comes to international markets, it's not just trade, there's a lot of international treaties that you have to also understand, because some countries, they have some, aside from the standard, they also have some sort of treaties that you have to respect. So you have to understand all of those things, for you to penetrate those kinds of international markets. But of course, this is the foundation for this kind of a conversation. So like I said, so this is like for a local gap. There's a local gap to have the same structure. You can see, so this person has done one, so you can see it's going to pick this one. So the person asks you, have you done the proper hygiene? Have you done, just questions that actually matches, like I said, everything that is required from the structure of the global gap thing. And then for anyone who actually has complied, so this is like an example of what the certificate looks like. This is what we issued to one of our clients, a while ago, because we also issued this like this. So, and of course, when you look at the details of this producer, I look at it through the website. The Global Gap has a website where you can actually begin to validate their produce, and then so you can see that it's gonna have all the details and all of those. So with this document alone, so you can see like international markets all over the world are able to see that, so in Nigeria we have producers, and trust me, when it comes to the international markets, they don't buy small, they buy in heavy tonnages. They could be asking, can you bring 200 tons a day? Can you bring 500 tons a week? Can you bring 1,500 tons in 2 days? So the volume is always extremely high and very large. That the challenge now is more of how to meet up with those volumes. So, but like I said, the two things that are very important is what the quality and then the quantity. And I'm telling us that these are the two things that we actually need a lot of work to do on, for us to actually get the best out of our trade and trade treaties, so to speak, in the international scheme. So again, so if there's anyone who would like to be a farm assessor, an inspector, and auditor, we'll be having a training very soon, a very comprehensive one this time around. This will probably take a 3-day or 4-day event, where we'll actually have to now discuss everything about like I said, good agricultural practices, like I said earlier, not the subscripts here, and then by so doing, you become a registered auditor, recognized with Global Gap as well. But of course, this training is not just for. It requires some sort of assessment, some sort of tests, and done. And of course, after all the fees are being paid, everything is going to be done. But of course, this gives us the advantage of having to be one of the few first local verification experts and assessors and inspectors, and of course having a full understanding of what good agricultural practice looks like, and an annex in every other state that we are in. So I believe that with this, by the way, I also need to chip this in. Today is my birthday, so I'm happy to do this on my birthday, and it's one of the things I'm happy to also share.
Happy birthday to you.
Thank you very much, sir. So
congratulations on your new age. Happy birthday.
Thank you, sir. Thank you very much. So I think this rounds up the whole conversation. And I hope I've been able to share a few things that would be functional for us all. Thank you very much for the time spent. So in case we have any question or contribution, we can quickly do that now. The floor is open for us all.
Good afternoon, everybody.
Hi, good afternoon.
Thank you very much, sir. We are actually enlightened. I appreciate your effort. God bless you, sir. I just want to find out, you mentioned of proper hygiene. Can you please throw more light on what you meant by proper hygiene, sir? My name is Monday.
Proper hygiene.
Yes.
Okay, so I said that hygiene is something that is very critical, when it comes to production, but it starts even from the seed production itself. And that's why I said the kind of seed treatment that you do, the kind of records that you keep, the kind of so there's called plant protection products. What kind of plant protection products are you using? What kind of enhancers are you using to grow your crops? So when it comes to food safety, it's a whole lot, because it's not just about so like, okay, let me put it like this. I said there's a difference between food safety and hygiene. So sometimes your food might be grown in a hygienic manner, like this. They grow in a very good environment and all of those things. But while you are being clean and where it's being safe and all of those things, but you're growing with every day you're always using DD force. Every day you're using you are always using what's it called? Herbicides. Every day you are using these heavy toxic chemicals. So by the time you harvest those products, it will look very hygienic. It will look very fine, but that doesn't mean it's safe. That doesn't make it safe for consumption. So that's why there are two different things. So what makes it for us what is safe for production, what is safe for consumption, is not just from what you see, it's from what you must have observed or what the person must have been doing over time. Because you might have been doing something and just go by accumulation. It can be accumulating, and it's not something you can see with the eyes. So when you put a lot of chemicals in things, you can't see it with the eyes. It's something that you just have to be, it has to be tested. So that's why sometimes when you take our produce out, it looks very good to us here. It looks very fine. But when I take it out, they'll be like that. They did the test. This one is poison. This one is not food, though. You understand? Because they've seen a lot of it's called maximum residuals. They've seen a lot of chemicals in them, right? But you cannot see them because not in the naked eyes. So that's like I said, there's a difference between food safety and hygiene. Hygiene basically is more of like how you wash your hands before you grow the crops. How you ensure you don't put food, you don't put not eat while you're cleaning your clothes. I mean, there are some limits, The same way we say when we're doing COVID-19, and I think we have to avoid, I think we have to do. So basically, that's. I think I'm not sure if I was able to explain a few things. Thank
Please, can you, please put everybody on mute. Start it again. Put everybody on mute, please. Put everybody on mute. Put everybody on mute, please.
Yeah, I've done so now.
Please, excuse me, sir.
Yes, please.
Yes, just to follow up to the last question, do we have organic insecticide that we can be able to use to control this pest and this all these insects that affects our crops? Because I think we are having that kind of a lot of farmers are asking question: is there any organic insecticide that can be used against this instead of using all these heavy chemicalized organic chemicals for control, please?
Yes, there are organic methods. So for example, we have a combination of ginger and garlic and neem extracts. Sometimes there's where you can use pepper, there's where you can use all of those combination of different crops, to fight pests. But however, what we need to understand is this, like, so there's a point I made in one of the things that our schools are, there's what we call IPM, that is integrated pest management. So, and IPM also works for so many other things. It means that it's a combination of how you use your things. Take, for example, in our homes, there are some homes that every day they use insecticides because there's always mosquito in their house. But then, if that same house had just taken some time to put mosquito nets in all the rooms, clean all the drainages, make sure that the environment is very dry, then you don't create any breeding room for mosquitoes. And that way, you don't need to be spraying every day. That's the same way it works with plants as well. Sometimes by doing the right practices, by ensuring that you don't leave residues, by ensuring that you have what we call, because it's integrated, so there are different methods. You don't have overgrown breeds. You don't do a lot of, you don't waste water. You don't waste, you prune appropriately. By the time you do, so there are, like I said, different crops have different requirements. So by the time you do, take for example, by the time you use fly traps, you use pest traps, you use so many. So there are so many things that we can use that are mechanical, that are cultural, that are like, that are things within the environment that we can use to curb some of all these attacks. It's like there's a way you can actually grow crops. We call them trap crops. So you grow those crops as a way of just diverting those insects from your main crop to those. So we call it like devil crops. So instead of them attacking your crops, they'll be attacking what you just planted for them to just eat this one. Well, by the time if you have a very strong biodiversified farm, whereby you have multiple crops, whereby one crop is helping you prevent some sort of insects from coming to this main crop. So there are different methods, of warding away pests. My point there is like that we don't always have to focus on just using pesticide, even if it's organic or not, but by having a cultural system, by the way you design your farm by itself has already giving you a level of protection before you begin to think of external inputs, to keep the pests at low. But yes, they are.
All right. Thank you. Understood.
Okay, so are there any more questions, contributions, or we can?
So I have a question, Tokwe.
Yes, sir.
How do we know the certification agencies or organizations that we need to engage with if we want to export to different countries? So maybe I want to export to Europe or to the UK or to Ukraine. How do I know these are the agencies I need to engage with to get their certification and get their standards before I can export to that country? Do you have any thoughts on that?
The market itself, who you intend to sell to, will give you the specifications or the certification requirements. So like how do I put this? Like, for example, if you are sending it to any EU state, most of the time they will probably want to ask for your EU certification. If it's organic, you probably want to make sure they want to ask for the organic EU certification. If it's so it depends on the produce itself and depends on who is buying. So the buyer itself has a preference. So sometimes, because there's what we call what's it called? For food safety, I can't remember the name, but there's a general treaty. So whereby if you are exporting any food to some certain kind of countries or some certain kind of markets, you want to be sure that it has that extra layer of certification. I can't remember the name, but even all certification bodies come together to to identify that, okay, this one particular certification that we would all require. So everything is mostly defined by the market itself that you're selling to. The market itself will determine what kind of certification that you need to operate. I mean, for example, it's not you don't want to grow you don't want to export what's it called, organic, and then you are looking for something that is not organic. So you also want to have something that sometimes the combination. Take for example, some companies will require that you have something of, take for example, you want to have a global gap, and then they will say it has to be organic, and so that it has to be halal, or it has to be. So so it depends on what the market itself would tell you what you should be looking, what you should be working towards, the kind of standards you be working towards. I don't know if that was if I understood that.
Yes, okay, I get you. Thank you.
Okay. So I think Captain, sir, I think we can round up from here, sir, and have the correct today.
Okay, thank you very much, Dr. and Captain John. God bless you people very much for this opportunity.
So thank us all for taking time to be here. I hope we make many good things. I hope this will help us get our farms better. So in answer earlier, I think we call it a day. Thank you for your time spent.
Thank you very much.
Most grateful, sir.
Appreciate. Thank you.